Hi, Abdullah.
How are you?
Good. First, I want to thank you so much for joining us. I know you're super busy with the floods and the election and whatnot. And I just want to thank you so much for joining us today. And Dearborn girl. And also, we know each other, but you don't know. You forgot. I met you a little over 2 years ago. I look way better. Don't worry about it. With Hanan Scott, she's my mentor.
Okay.
So when I first got into journalism,
Is that outside of Big B?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you were the first person we interviewed.
Okay.
Yeah, and I had no idea who you are, and you had no idea. You still don't know who I am. Well, now you do. So yeah, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's nice to see you again.
Excited to be here.
Yeah. I wanted.
Congrats on the new role with DG.
Oh yeah, I'm super excited. I don't know if I do okay, but we'll see. You can judge later. I want to start off like you are a proud Dearborn citizen. I want to know, what is your favorite memory, your favorite childhood memory in Dearborn, if you have one? And you have to be honest, did you ever want to leave? Be honest.
Yeah. So I'll start with the latter question. So I left. So I left for graduate school.
Okay.
I was 19 when, turning 20 when I first graduated, moved on to U of M Ann Arbor for graduate school. I was out there for my master's in public health, and then I stayed there because I worked for the University of Michigan Ann Arbor health system for some time. It was in 2014 where I actually took a sabbatical from work, and I went to the country of Jordan, working with the United Nations in the Palestinian refugee camps.
Wow.
It was actually my goal to stay in Jordan forever.
No
and so
way.
while I was out there for several months, I was also trying to get a job internationally.
Okay.
But my placement came back in a country that I didn't want to go to. And so I ended up returning. But there was a period of time where my hopes were to go internationally and just work on issues that I was very passionate about, just improvement of public health across the board and working with the most vulnerable populations, in this case refugee populations. And so there was a time where I did leave, but I found myself coming back home to Dearborn and wanted to make a difference right back home. My favorite childhood memory, there are honestly so many, but the one I keep thinking of was we had, growing up, working class, right? Everybody can relate to the struggle. Very working class family. We never had a pool. We never even had those plastic pools. All we had were the Pepsi coolers.
Okay.
And so me and my brothers, there was only 3 brothers at the time, would sneak out the hot water from the basement to fill it up into like jacuzzis.
Okay.
And my father came home to his 3 sons, each one sitting in a Pepsi cooler that's smaller than us, and so our arms and legs are sticking out. And I remember Abdullah, the ice cream man, came by and just like gave us ice cream, and we thought we were living the most luxurious life.
In a Pepsi cooler. Nice.
But I think that is just, it's the simple things that you remember. It's just trying out with family and loved ones. It's enjoying the basic things, and a free ice cream cone from Abdullah doesn't hurt.
So you say you wanted to do like international work, and you wanted to live in Jordan. Like, you were okay with leaving that family you are so fond about? In
2014, when I found myself in Jordan, the issue of Palestine is something that's near and dear to my heart.
Okay.
I first got my political activism in BDS, activism on college campuses, and the issue of Palestine, I think, is an issue for all of humanity to understand and to struggle with. And so when I went to Jordan, I met a group of diverse volunteers from all across the globe, and we traveled Jordan together as we were doing our work. And I was just attracted to the folks that I was working with, the heart and the passion and the devotion that they had to the overall goal, which was the goal of this agency was to no longer need to exist. It was to assist Palestinians. It was to ensure that they had the right to return to the point where this agency no longer needed to exist. So imagine that was actually their 5-year goal, and it gets extended obviously every 5 years because of the political dynamics. But I just really enjoyed the work that I was doing. I was meeting new people. I was learning new things in an environment like that. The family sacrifice is obviously difficult, and I found myself, back home. But for a period of time, there was this want, I would say, to just go explore for a period of time.
I think that's awesome that you brought that activism to your home and to Dearborn. I want to know, so I do hear that some people think that you're more of an activist than a mayor or a politician. What do you say to those people?
I don't think a mayor is anything more than a great neighbor with a little extra responsibility. I don't it's okay to be an activist and in office. Just know the levers that you need for change. One of the things I learned is policy is a lever for change. But the struggle is people who look like us, who sound like us, who have names like us, don't have a finger on that lever. And so it's important that we also have diversity and folks representing us from the community who are part of the community. And so, it's okay to be an activist. I mean, and when I was a state representative, it was activism that led me to mobilize the community and push back against Consumers Energy that wanted to install a new peaking generator, is what they call it, that would have added 1,000 new tons of pollution. But because we mobilized in the way that activists do, we pushed back through media campaign, we pushed back through op-eds, we pushed back at town halls that the government held, to the point in which Windsor elected officials chimed in with us in support of us and the efforts that we were doing, until Consumers Energy actually withdrew its permit request. And we had won that battle. It wasn't because I was a state rep that we won that fight. It was because we organized as a community, as activists do. And so I think it's important to bring that with you. There's an energy that comes with activism. You shouldn't have to shy away with it.
Exactly.
Just understand when you're in government, obviously things unfortunately take longer to achieve the outcomes that you desire.
Yeah.
But you can still bring that heart and passion and tenacity that activists have to office and keep it rooted in community, and I think the outcome is great.
Honestly, like as a Dearborn resident, I would prefer my mayor to be an activist.
Yeah.
Like I want my mayor to fight for me. I don't want him to be silent when all hell's breaking loose. That's what I prefer. I don't know why anyone would object to that. But also, I wanted to. You look really young, and then you tell me like you spent so many years in Ann Arbor, and you worked there, and then you went to live in like. How many lifetimes have you lived?
Yeah.
How old are you?
I'm 31 in a few months.
Okay.
In a few months, and then what matters isn't a person's age. I was 25 when I announced for office my first time, and people thought I was too young then as well. And I'm the youngest state rep in Dearborn's position. But for mayor, we had a 31-year-old mayor before, Mayor Guido.
Oh, really?
He didn't look 31. But
Is that shade?
No, it's not shade. What I'm saying, I think Mayor Guido had a little less hair. I'm losing mine now.
Oh,
He had a little less hair, was a little bit larger, and so I think he had that old school Italian look.
Okay.
And most people didn't assume he was 31. Excuse me. What I would say though is, what matters is the experience you've had, what you've done, the time that you have had.
Okay.
Age, although wisdom comes with age, and it's a great quote by Supreme Court Justice Sotomayor. Although wisdom comes with age, the mere number of years guarantees nothing. And so you tell me, is a number of years that someone has lived a great indicator for how well they'll serve? I haven't seen that.
Okay, so that's what you say to people that think that you're way too young to be mayor.
I would say just assess my credibility, my qualifications based on what I've been able to do in the time that I've had. In the last 5 years as state rep, what have I done? Have I accomplished the things I told you I'm going to set out and accomplish? Have I ever dropped the ball? Have I not advocated for a change, even if we weren't able to accomplish it all the way through or see it all the way through? I think that's what matters, is somebody who's willing to step up to the plate, to push forth a full effort, to build a robust team, because no single individual can accomplish the things that Dearborn needs accomplished. It takes the ability to build a team and to coalesce competent people who reflect the needs and values of our community in order to accomplish that desirable goal. And I think that's what matters. Being 35, being 50, being 70, it doesn't matter. I mean, I supported Bernie Sanders in a presidential election. Bernie wasn't the youngest. Bernie was one of the oldest. But for me, Bernie, in my eyes, was somebody who was consistent, who stood up for his values loud and clear, who had the strongest policies that I agreed with. And I think that was, most notable for me, and I think most notable for folks in Dearborn. And so, it's not always about age.
No, not at all. I completely agree. To be honest, I prefer a younger mayor because you were able to help everyone, like with the floods. You went into the basements, you cleaned with them, you ran around, you did what a mayor should be doing. After the floods swept Dearborn, in 2014, the residents thought that Dearborn had improved. Why did the system fail us this time?
To your earlier point about being younger to go in the basements and clean, it doesn't matter one's physical ability to have gone into a basement or to have mobilized the team and helped out the residents. I don't think, age had anything to do with it.
Really?
For me, it was like a wajib. Like, these are my neighbors, these are my friends, these are my family members. If we're not taking care of one another, who's taking care of us? And that's why we did it. And the props goes to all the volunteers that showed up each and every single day. And every time I would go to that parking lot, 11 o'clock, try to see how many volunteers showed up, to see how many teams we had and how many houses we can take on that day. I was floored at the number of people that continued to show up and how big the team grew. It grew to 40, 50 people a day. Folks who were driving an hour, hour and a half away based on the call that we had put out on social media. And so to them goes all the credit. But anybody could have put together a Google form and asked for volunteers, and put together a Google form and asked what homes need assistance. It didn't matter for someone's age. It mattered for the person to think quickly on their feet, to understand the immediate public health needs, which was get sewage out of basements, get furniture and debris out of basements, now tackle the decontamination and the mold that's festering in people's basements. And so that was our thought process. As to why the system failed, I don't speak to anything in which I don't have concrete facts and data to report on. And so I think what we're waiting for is a third-party assessment as to why and how this happened. But what I think is clear is when the flooding occurred in 2014, it should have been a wake-up call to Dearborn that climate change is real and Dearborn is not prepared. And if we look to other cities as examples, in Taylor there was massive flooding in the 80s. And what they did was they created giant retention basins and turned them into golf courses. Ann Arbor had a problem with flooding in many neighborhoods. They actually just made a giant football field, dug 12 feet deep, and that'll be a new retention basin for excess water. As well as it gave credits, financial credits to homeowners to plant rain gardens on their properties. A rain garden can absorb 1,000 gallons of water if built right. The city of Detroit, if you drive on Oakman Boulevard, which is like, the premier street to live on in East Dearborn, Oakman Boulevard has a median. This was like my dream street to live on growing up. If you drive from Dearborn to Detroit, the median in Dearborn is just grass and trees. The median in Detroit is actually a basin that can collect water and a rain garden. And so when it rains, the median in the Detroit side of Oakman Boulevard actually absorbs thousands of more gallons of water than the Dearborn side because they made these investments over time. And so I think what was clear was Dearborn didn't plan accordingly. And so I think that is certainly a part of the equation. The rest of it, I'm going to wait for the third-party assessment to come out.
So, did they think, okay, it happens every 100 years, we don't need to work on it now? Is that what they thought?
I actually, what I did was I looked up old newspaper articles from 2014 to see what government officials said at that point in time. And that was the response. This is a once in a 100-year flood. It's not predictable. Basements are not living areas. You shouldn't have remodeled your basement the way you did, right? That was kind of the commentary that came out of the mayor at the time and implore everybody to go and look at it. And so I really believe that there was a feeling that this was just an occurrence that happened once every however many years. Well, it happened again, partial flooding in 18 occurred. Flooding obviously happened again in 2021. And then because it rained so much, just a week, 2 weeks later after that major flooding, there was a minor flooding again in Dearborn because of excessive rain again, 3.5 inches that came in. And so I think what we have to take away is this is the new norm. These aren't 100-year storms, 1,000-year storms. This is climate change and, weather that's, kind of disastrous in a sense is going to become a new norm and we have to adjust.
Okay. Let me ask you something. I need you to be straight up. Does the city neglect the east and south end of Dearborn?
Put me on the spot.
Yeah.
In many ways, yes.
Okay.
It does. There are great inequities if you look at the city and the investments that the city makes. If you look to the south end has asthma rates that are 2 to 4 times greater than the average in the state of Michigan. If we look to the way investments are made in various parts of the city, the majority of investments are made into the downtown west business district, not necessarily the east or the south, which used to have this thriving small business district. It still does, but one that we can build upon. And so I think there's always, over the last, under the current leadership, there is this hyper focus on these 3 main blocks in downtown West Dearborn, and kind of a neglect for Southwest Dearborn as well, which is like a white working class area that has its own downtown but doesn't see the level of investment that it deserves as well. And so I think there is a great divide in the city in inequities, and it's based on representation, it's based on focus, it's based on many factors.
Based on the demographic?
Of course. I mean, the demographic divide is real. As I've canvassed the neighborhoods and we're knocking through our campaign, I think you realize just how segregated the city of Dearborn is. And the West, I like to split it up in two. There's the Southwest and then there's the West. Because the Southwest is like this white working class neighborhoods. It's like the East End, which is predominantly Arab, except the Southwest is predominantly white. And I think there are far more similarities than there are differences. And so I think what we also need to do as a city is find opportunities to build bridges for folks to come with one another and celebrate those differences in meaningful ways.
Is that one way you're gonna is that something you're gonna change in the future if you're mayor?
My hope is you have to create those opportunities, and I think as mayor you can certainly do that. But I think what's also most important is taking my team on the road. The way government operates now is you have to come to government and ask them for what you need, when it should be the reverse. Public service is about you going to neighborhoods, meeting people where they are and asking them, what can I do for you? And so, my hope is, inshallah, if we are successful in our election, is to go neighborhood to neighborhood and have these block parties, invite the neighbors out, and then ask them, what are the top 5, 10 changes you want to see in your specific neighborhood? And I imagine there are going to be some overlaps, but in many neighborhoods, they're going to have specific things they want changed that impact them on a daily. And those are the things that we want to tackle.
Were you always this ambitious about Dearborn? Like, did you always want to run for office at some point in your life?
No. So I wanted to be the doctor. Yeah, right? Like surprise. I got my MPH and I applied for medical school. I was waitlisted 3 years in a row. And so, failure is a real thing, but, whenever you fail, you want to fail forward.
Yeah.
And so that was one, I took that sabbatical and I went overseas to try to just rethink what other career avenues I wanted to partake in. And so when I was actually here, I was pursuing, I was climbing in the healthcare sector. I worked in the private sector for several years. But then, some life events occurred and I realized that what I was pursuing wasn't as meaningful to me. And public service was a route that I wanted to go after, to fight for others and give back to others that provided me, my family, everything. And so when we announced for office, that was the mindset that I was in. So how do I give back to this community that I love? There is no community like Dearborn.
Yeah. Oh, truly.
Yeah.
I've lived everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm an international gal.
Yeah.
Literally everywhere. I've never seen a community like Dearborn.
Yeah.
Nowhere. Actually, not to get into myself too much, but like once I step out of Dearborn, like I went to Birmingham like the other week for dinner, I was so out of place, like a fish out of water. I was like, where am I?
Yeah.
Where are my Arabs? So yeah, I think it's so important that we keep the community like tight knit and we like keep it safe.
Well, that's the uniqueness of Dearborn, right? It's this city of 95,000 that manages to sustain that hometown feel, where all the neighbors and friends grow to be family that are there for you in moments of joy and in moments of grief. And that's, that's the Dearborn that I know, but that's not the Dearborn, that's the Dearborn I grew up in. But I don't think it's the Dearborn that we are now. There's a lot of changes. Dearborn has been in autopilot or cruise control, whatever you want to call it, for a long time. And I think what we need to do is actually get leadership that puts it back into drive and helps move the community forward into the 21st century.
Okay, so let me ask you this. A lot of young residents in Dearborn, Gen Z, we don't really care about the polls or voting or whatnot. What are you going to bring to us? Why should we run to the polls on August 3rd? What's in it for us?
Yeah, there's, I came across an elderly Yemeni American man, and he reminded me, he said, "Sawtak quwwatak." Your voice is your power. Your vote is your power. And I think that's the message to young folk, that there are a lot of things within our city that you don't like. There are a lot of changes that you'd love to see. But to implement those changes, you have to share your voice with us. And one of the most powerful ways to do that is by casting your ballot in those whom you believe in. Be it me, myself, or anybody else. My message is go out there and vote, because showcasing that you do vote will also put young people on the map, right?
Yes.
Elected officials have this habit of targeting their messaging or their mailers or their digital campaign, whatever it might be, to those people who have a history of voting, because you're trying to win an election.
Yeah.
And so, if you show the power of young people's votes, I promise you, you're going to see an agenda that's enacted that reflects the priorities and values of young people as well, which is why we encourage people to vote. I mean, to think that in a city of about 95,000, where 65, 70,000 people are registered to vote. We're expecting maybe 18,000 votes in August. 18,000 people will determine who serves, at least who faces off in November, but who might serve as mayor for the next however many years. It's very powerful.
Yeah, extremely powerful. And I think that the youth need to take charge and not let the older residents determine their fate. We need to look into who we're voting for, and we need to say what we need. We need to be very vocal in what the community needs, because we're going to be here. Well,
make your voices heard.
Not to be rude, but we're going to be here longer, So we want a mayor that's with us.
And it's a balance, right? You'd be surprised, young, old, Arab, not Arab, white, black, brown, whatever it might be. A lot of the issues we face may differ.
Yeah.
For a young family, it might be purchasing a new home, but the property taxes are much higher for a family that's been there for quite some time. For an Arab American family that's in the South End, the issues of air quality and schooling are bigger issues because of the surrounding environment versus those who live in the West End. But what's important is that the values should all be the same.
Yeah.
Right? You should want for your neighbor what you want for yourself, and we should have this understanding that if you uplift the most marginalized in a community, by default you uplift yourself, rather than if I just take care of myself, I think I'm bringing a community up with me. It never works that way. And so young, old, black, brown, Arab, whatever it might be, white, everybody needs to come together and make their voices heard. And collectively, I think in that regard, we then are going to get a diverse group of elected officials who represent the values and principles and issues we all want handled.
Exactly. I couldn't have said that better. Last thing I want to ask you.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of people in Dearborn disperse, going to Canton, going to Birmingham, going to Livonia, I don't know where. What are you going to do to make sure that Dearborn stays this tight-knit community that we have now, that hopefully our children will have?
One of the struggles we have is that people growing up, for the Arab American community, I'll speak to that community first. As a member of the Muslim Arab American community, you didn't have a halal meat market anywhere else. You didn't have the halal restaurants. But now you can, they have them in Canton. They're in other cities across the state. And you can drive 15 minutes for whatever else you were looking for. And so what people are doing is they're making a checklist. What is my trade-off? What's my bang for my buck in terms of my purchasing power on a home? How much am I paying in property taxes? What is the crime like? What is the schools, what are the schools ranked? How is the auto insurance and the home insurance in the city? And on a lot of those variables, or those metrics, Dearborn loses. If you compare us to Livonia, Canton, Northville, or wherever else it is. And so what we have to do is we have to compete again. And so no longer can we say, we're just Dearborn, we have all these great things, people are going to be here no matter what because the mosques are here. No, mosques are being built everywhere. Halal restaurants are everywhere. You just follow some of the foodies on Instagram and they'll tell you what restaurant secretly has a halal menu without saying halal on their menu. And so we have to realize that. And that goes back to my earlier point of we have to kick Dearborn out of cruise control. We have to get into the driver's seat and actually drive and implement changes. The Civic Center, which was this new thing when I grew up, is still the same. It's the same rock wall. It's the same pool. It's the same court and the same gym, I think with the same dumbbells. Okay?
Oh my God.
We have to reimagine what it can be for young people of today, where vaping is an epidemic, where EA Sports gaming is a real thing, and some folks don't have access to the newest or latest of Xboxes and PlayStations, but we can create a room for them at the Civic Center. And so we have to, reimagine the services we offer to our residents. But we kind of have to be a bulldog in that fashion, because people can drive anywhere, and pretty soon, if there's autonomous vehicles, you don't even have to drive.
Yeah.
You just have to sit in a car for 15 minutes, right? And so, but for me, personally, as long as I'm within 2 to 5 miles of a Tahamas, I'll never move. And so as long as Tahamas doesn't franchise, I think it's safe to say I'm going to be in Dearborn.
Okay, thank God.
Yeah.
Okay, Abdullah, thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you.
me on this conversation. I know we went through a lot of stages of grief. But yeah, I just want to thank you a lot for coming. And most of all, making Dearborn a priority and
It's
making
home.
a difference.
It's home. Thank you so much for having me. Shout out to Dearborn Girl always for the great podcasts and videos you guys are hosting. And again, just a reminder to everybody, please come out and vote on August 3rd.
August 3rd. Vote.
Cannot emphasize
I'm looking
that
at you.
Yeah.
Vote.
Perfect. Thank you.